So today we're actually going to look at the adaptations that things that live in this mesopelagic zone have that allow for them to survive down here where it's weird and strange to us. So we pull these animals up from the mesopelagic zone, like this black scabbard fish, which you can see right here. Uh, and we look at them and we think they look really weird. They look kind of slimy. They've got these big bulging eyes. They've got these big sharp teeth and large mouths. And we're like, these things look creepy. Um, and so we look at them like, that's weird. But what's cool about these animals that live here is that they look that way for a reason, and every single feature that you see on them is there designed to allow for them to survive in their habitat. So they're perfectly designed to live in this habitat of the mesopelagic zone. All right, so let's look at this zone and their adaptations. So only about 20% of the food that's available in the epipelagic ever makes it down into the mesopelagic zone. Because there is less food in the mesopelagic zone, you have fewer animals that can survive down here. So you will not have as abundant or as many animals in this zone as you will in like the epipelagic zone. But remember how we talked about how you get patchiness in the epipelagic zone? So in some areas you get like patches where there's abundant life, and then in other areas where there's like not much going on. So like here you have a bunch of life, and then out here you have like almost nothing. Remember that? Okay, so the patchiness in the epipelagic is actually reflected in the mesopelagic. So in the areas where you have lots of life in the epipelagic, there's going to be more food falling into the mesopelagic in these areas than in other areas. So you're going to get more life here in the mesopelagic than you will here. Does that make sense? So the patchiness that is actually reflected in the mesopelagic zone as well. And most of the characteristics and adaptations that the animals in this area have is for the lack of food, since only 20% ever makes it down. One of those adaptations is that these animals are pretty small. So like we talked about with the fish, between 1 and 4 inches on average, they are pretty small because it takes lots of food and energy to grow to be a large size, so they tend to stay small. Some general adaptations that some of these guys will have down here. Many of them are sit and wait predators. So they're going to be just kind of chilling, hanging out in the water column, waiting for things to come by so that they can eat them. And so they don't know when any of their meals are going to come by. And so they need to be able to eat whatever swims by them. And if that prey item is larger than their mouth, then that's the problem because they can't really eat it. So they have big mouths, so that pretty much whatever swims by, they can eat it because their mouth is large enough to eat that prey item. And also, like their jaws are big, but then their jaws can also be hinged to open even wider. And they're going to have these big sharp teeth so that when they clamp down on that prey will not get away because those teeth are going to impale the prey item and they won't be able to get away. So they've got these big giant mouths and these big teeth to try and help to capture prey. If they do eat something maybe even that's larger than themselves, their stomachs can adapt to that. They actually have these huge expandable stomachs. They can swallow these things, and then their stomachs will expand to fit that giant meal into their stomachs. So you can see that in the picture. So here's the big mouth and then the sharp teeth. And then this is an anglerfish. You can see the male hanging off the female. And then they would have this big expandable stomach to be able to eat whatever comes by. And they're also going to not be picky eaters. They're going to have a very broad diet. They will eat literally anything that comes by. They're not going to be like, I don't like calamari, ew. So if it's a squid that swims by, they're going to eat it. If it's a fish, they're going to eat it. Krill, they're going to eat it. So they will eat whatever. They are not picky. We have two major types of animals. You're going to have migrating animals and non-migrating animals. Migrating animals are going to be what we talked about last cycle briefly. Those are the animals that are going to hide down here during the day and then migrate up to the surface at night to feed. Those are going to be migrating animals. Non-migrating are going to spend their entire lives here in the mesopelagic zone. So they're not going to migrate up to the surface waters to feed. Because they are different, they're going to have different adaptations. So non-migrating fish, well, first of all, copepods and krill are going to eat the detritus, the marine snow that's drifting down from above. The sit and wait predators are going to be a little weird. Okay, so the sit and wait predators basically are trying to survive until their next food comes along, their next source of food comes along. And so that may be a couple months from now, that may be 6 months from now. Basically, they want to try and conserve energy in between their meals so that they can survive to the next meal. So they're going to have all sorts of adaptations in order to reduce the amount of energy that they spend. Here's some of those adaptations. They're going to have flabby, watery flesh instead of like muscles. So muscles take a lot of energy to maintain. One of the reasons why, like, if you work out a lot and you have like big muscles, you're going to be able to eat a lot more is because muscles burn energy. So your metabolism is faster. So they take a lot more energy to maintain. If they're a sit and wait predator, they're literally like not moving really. So they're going to have not very well developed muscles because they don't want to spend the energy in maintaining that muscle mass. Does that make sense? They don't need muscle mass because they're not really swimming. That also means that they're not going to really have strong bones, because the whole purpose of bone is for like muscle to pull on the bone and like move like your arm, or for a fish move the backbone to allow them to swim. So if they don't have very well developed muscles because they're not going to be swimming, they don't need these big strong bones in order to be able to, for the muscles to pull on for them to swim. So they will have weaker bones because it will take less energy. And those weaker bones are also not as heavy. They will also not have spines and defensive structures, because the whole goal of their life is to pretty much remain neutrally buoyant in the water. So kind of like allow for them to just hang in the water column with as little energy as possible. So if they had spines and defensive structures, that would make them too heavy and they would sink down, and they'd actually have to like swim and like try and maintain the depth at which they're at. So they don't have spines or defensive structures because they would be too heavy. That also means because they don't have spines and defensive structures and they are neutrally buoyant, they don't need a swim bladder. So swim bladders take a lot of energy to maintain, to like keep the right amount of air in there and adjust it and make sure it's just right. So too much energy, they're neutrally buoyant, they don't need it, they don't have it. Does that make sense? Okay. It's kind of weird. This last blank says swimming, if you can tell. Migrating fish are going to be different. They do have to swim. They have to make it up to the surface to feed at night. And then they have to return back to the depths during the day. They do this in order to avoid predators during the day in the epipelagic zone. So they come up when it's dark out. During the day, they spend that time during the day kind of in a zombie-like state, where they're just kind of sleeping, kind of zombie-ish. They're not really moving. They're just trying to conserve energy during the day. And because these guys are swimming, they are going to need well-developed muscles, so they will be much more muscular. They also will then need bones for those muscles to pull on. So they will have stronger, well-developed bones. Because they do have bones and well-developed muscles, they are going to need a swim bladder to offset that weight. And so they will have a swim bladder, but they're swimming from down here in the mesopelagic zone up to the surface. And that's going to be a huge pressure difference for them. So do you remember what we talked about earlier this semester with swim bladders? What happens to swim bladders if you bring a fish up too fast? Yeah, it like explodes, right? That swim bladder expands really fast. So these fish, as they swim up, they're going to need to be able to adjust the volume in that swim bladder very, very, very fast. So they can, or what a lot of them have is they have a swim bladder filled with fat rather than air. This fat doesn't contract and expand like air does with the pressure differences, but it's also less dense, making the fish more buoyant, which is kind of cool. So they've got a swim bladder filled with fat. So how did we actually discover these migrations? Because this is literally the largest migration that occurs on Earth, and it occurs every night. It is larger than like the migrations of the wildebeest and stuff on the plains of Africa in terms of biomass. So, and it happens every night, all the time, for these animals. So we actually discovered this migration during World War II when they started using sonar a lot, right, looking for German U-boats. And so we had these boats out in the open ocean, and they were taking, using their sonar, and they knew that they were in water that was thousands and thousands of feet deep. They knew where their bottom was. But on these sonar plots, they kept getting these weird readings. So at about like 1,000 to 1,600 feet, they'd get what they called a false bottom. So the sonar person who was manning the sonar, looking at the reading, was getting like these shadowy plots, like a reading of a bottom, at like 1,600 to 1,000, or 1,000 to 1,600 feet. They're like, that's weird. We know that we're in water that's thousands of feet deep. What could this possibly be? And then they also noticed that during the day it was down here around 1,600 feet, and then at night it would come up towards the surface. And they even noticed if the moon was full, that little shadowy plot would stay deeper in the water. If it was a new moon, there was no moon, it would come up closer to the surface. Even to the point where if a cloud passed over the moon, it would rise up closer to the surface. They're like, what the heck is going on? What is this? This weird bottom thing that moves. So they pulled a net behind the boat at this depth, and they pulled up whatever was there. And what they found was a bunch of fish, squid, krill, and all of these migrating animals. I found all of these migrating animals. Crazy. Bless you. So they pulled up squid and krill, shrimp, a bunch of stuff, and all of these fish. The squid and krill and stuff, those actually don't contribute to the deep scattering layer, which is the technical term for what those shadowy plots that were on the sonar. They called that the deep scattering layer. Those guys, the krill and shrimp and copepods and stuff, those don't really contribute to the deep scattering layer because the sonar beams just pass right through their body. But what actually contributes to it are the lanternfish and the other fish that have swim bladders that have air in them. And those swim bladders that have air are what scatter the sonar beams and cause this false bottom to form. So that's how they discovered the vertical migrations of these animals. These vertical migrations are important because they help to increase the food supply of the mesopelagic zone, because as these mesopelagic fish migrate up to the surface and eat up here, there's more food up here for them to eat, so a bigger population of these fish can be supported. And so as they swim back down and up, they swim by the non-migrating fish and provide a food source for them, and more of a food source because their population is larger. And then also as they swim down, they actually create little tiny vortexes behind them that help to kind of pull out some of the detritus and stuff from the surface waters towards the mesopelagic zone. So they do actually help to increase the food supply of the mesopelagic zone. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. They also have eyes. Yeah. That help them to survive down here. So fish that live in the mesopelagic zone, their eyes are going to be much more sensitive to light than your eyes are. Fish that live here, their eyes are actually so sensitive to light that they can detect light at levels that would look completely and utterly totally dark to us. So what would look totally dark to us, they can actually still see a little bit. Yeah, weird. So they're very, very sensitive to light. They also have these cool eyes. They're called tubular eyes, which are shaped like tubes. Okay. What shape are your eyes?
Round.
Yeah, round. They're spheres. So they have these tubular eyes that have two retinas. How many retinas do you have? One. Okay, so they have two retinas that actually are, allow for the fish to kind of have like two sets of eyes. So each eye can actually see in two different directions at the same time, which is crazy. I'll show you a picture so that you can see that. So here's what it looks like. Here's the lens of the eye. Here's like the tube, so you can kind of see how it's not a circle like your eye is. Yeah? Okay, and then here's one retina back here. Here's another retina right here. So any light that's coming in from this direction is going to pass through the lens and then hit this retina that's back here, and then get transferred up the optic nerve to the brain of the fish so that they can see. And then any light that's coming from this direction hits this extra retina, which can then send the signal to the brain so the fish can see. So they're actually able to see in two directions at once out of each eye, which is pretty cool. And those eyes are huge so that they can take in as much light as possible of the little light that's left. Okay? Kind of cool. So any of the predators that are down here are pretty much going to rely on vision for hunting their prey. And the prey are going to try and avoid being eaten. And they're mostly going to use camouflage to try and avoid being eaten because the spines and defensive structures are too heavy and too energy costly. So they don't have them. So camouflage is their best bet. The methods of camouflage that they are going to use are going to be pretty much the same as the methods in the epipelagic zone, but again, going to look kind of different. So you will have counter shading. So you will have fish that will have backs that will be black rather than like blue. Because when you look down in the water, down towards the deep sea, it's going to look utterly black. And so the backs of these fish are going to be black. The underside is going to be like a silvery color rather than like white, because the white would be pretty more obvious if you looked up towards the surface, whereas the silvery is going to kind of help blend in better. So they'll be counter shaded, they'll just have different colors than the epipelagic zone with black and silver. You also have animals that will be transparent. So they'll be see-through, so hopefully your predator looks right through you rather than looking at you directly. So they will be transparent. This is kind of cool. So deeper in the mesopelagic zone, down here and then into the deep sea, you're actually going to have fish and krill and stuff like that that are like bright red or like bright purple or black or like this weird white color. The reason for that is because light gets filtered out before this depth. So here, let me explain how you actually see, and then we'll explain what happens. So like Robbie's sweatshirt looks red to us because the visible spectrum of light hits his sweatshirt. Okay, the red dye in his sweatshirt absorbs all of the colors except for red. Red bounces back to your eye, and you see the color red. Down here, red light and other colors of light get filtered out up here in the epipelagic zone. So the red light never makes it down here. So you could be a krill that's bright red, but there's no red light to bounce off of your body and go to your predator's eyes. So they can't see you. So you pretty much just look black. Does that make sense? So that's kind of cool. When we pull these animals up, they look like all of these brilliant colors, but that's because they're up at the surface and we can actually use light to see them. But down there, they just look completely black, which is kind of cool. They will also still have like a silhouette. So even if they're like counter shaded and stuff, if a predator is looking up at them, they'll still be able to see like the outline of the body of the fish from below. So they will actually try and reduce that silhouette as much as possible, or reduce that outline by like being laterally compressed so that they produce as little of a silhouette as possible, so that the predator hopefully won't see them. So here's some pictures of this. Transparency. So this little krill here is transparent, so the predator hopefully sees through it. This is a counter-shaded fish with the black on the top and then the silvery on the underside. You see that? And then here's your hatchet fish. You can see the big tubular eyes, and then you can see laterally compressed, yeah? Compressed from side to side. Down here, animals are also bioluminescent. Bioluminescent, meaning they produce light. They can produce light in a couple of ways. Either they will have these organs that are called photophores that will do a chemical reaction and produce light, or they will actually have organs that they keep these bacteria in, and the bacteria will do photosynthesis and will produce light. But bioluminescence is light produced by living things, and some of these guys can produce light. And one of the ways they will actually use this bioluminescence is with counter-illumination, which you will see in the video that you will watch. But here's what they do. On the underside of their bodies, so they produce the silhouette, and on the underside of their bodies, where the silhouette would be created, they have these photophores, light-producing organs. And they're able to take those photophores and match the light that is coming in from the background. So however much light is coming in from the surface, they're able to match the intensity and color of that light so that it helps to break up their shape. So it looks kind of like this. So let's say that this is our little fish and our squid. That's their outline, what they would normally look like, their silhouette. If you stick them in water, okay, their outline gets a little bit blurrier because it's in water. And then here's what counter-illumination looks like. So white is the background color. Okay, let's say that that's like the color of light coming in from the surface. And then these are the photophores, or the light-producing organs. And those photophores are able to match the background light and break up the silhouette of the fish and the squid. Then you stick that in water where it gets a little bit blurrier, and the effect is even greater. You see that? Kind of cool, huh? So there, you would think like, hey, you produce light in a place where it's dark. That seems dumb and kind of like a beacon for your predators, but they're able to use it to break up their silhouette and hide from predators. So hopefully a predator won't recognize this shape or that shape as prey. All right, so that's cool, right? You can produce light to match the background light. The light that gets produced tends to be like a blue-green color. What's crazy is that some of these fish that are predators down here will actually have yellow filters on their eyes. So the yellow filter on their eye helps to filter out like the yellow of the blue-green color and the green of the blue-green color, and actually allows for them to distinguish between light that is natural, like coming in from the surface of the water that's produced by the sun, and light that is produced by animals. So it's like filters out, and this whole attempt of this animal to do like counter illumination and hide is pretty much for naught, because that predator can still see them. They're like, oh yeah, hey, your little trick, yeah, I can see through it. So they're able to still see and distinguish between natural light and artificial light, which is pretty cool. Some of them, so this is what I told you about photophores. Some of them will actually produce bioluminescent fluid. So what do you think would be a benefit of like an animal being able to release bioluminescent fluid in the water? Distraction, yeah. So think of it as like squid ink, right? But it glows in the dark in this area, which was kind of awesome. What happens is, how many of you have ever been in a dark room and somebody takes a picture with a camera and like flashes? Yeah, and you're like, I hate you so much right now because I can't see anything, and there's like a spot floating in your vision. That's what happens when these krill and other things release this bioluminescent fluid. It's a flash of light that helps to blind the predator so that the prey can get away. They're also going to use bioluminescence to attract mates. So different species of animals will have different patterns of photophores on their bodies. And then in that species, different genders will even have different patterns. So imagine like I could suddenly just turn off all the lights on Earth, it's completely 100% dark, um, and I'm like, all right, go find the one person that you're supposed to marry. And now you have to walk around blind and try and find that person. That's kind of what it's like for these animals trying to find a mate in this area and in the deep sea. So they have patterns of photophores on their body. So as this fish is swimming around, they're like, okay, I see you, but no, you're a different species than me. Okay, so I can't mate with you. Bye. And they're like swimming around. Okay, oh, you're a guy, I'm a guy, same species, but we can't reproduce. All right, see you later. And they're swimming around, swimming around. Okay, same species. Oh, and you're a female and I'm a guy. Let's make babies. Okay, so that's what they do. Those photophores and those patterns of photophores um, allow for them to determine where their mate is. So that's what they will use. One of the things they'll use bioluminescence for. Like we briefly said, they will use it to attract prey. So those anglerfish will have the lures that have the bacteria in them to produce light to attract prey. So like in Dory, right, where they're like, they see the light and they're like, I'm gonna get you, right? And they're like fascinated by the light, right? And then they pull it up, and then it's like big teeth and death. Yeah, that's anglerfish. So that's what they're gonna do. So here's where it gets pretty cool. Some of these animals will have like photophores around their eyes. So they'll have light producing organs around their eyes, and they will produce light and that are kind of like headlights or like flashlights as they swim through. So they'll have like, they'll illuminate whatever in front of them. So they have kind of like, vision in front of them. What's even weirder is some of them will produce red light. So remember all of those things that look black because they're bright red? If you produce red light, all of those things become visible. So, and weirder still, many of the animals that are down here can't see the color red because there's no red light down here, so why would they need to? They don't see the color red. So these animals that produce the red light can actually see their prey, sneak up on their prey, and their prey literally has no idea that they're coming because they can't see red. So all of that red stuff becomes visible. It's awesome. Okay, we're going to stop there.